Hello and welcome to Church at Home with Rachel for Thursday, the 5th of January. My name is Rachel Parker. My pronouns are she and her, and I am an Anglican priest or minister, pastor, in the Diocese of Edmonton in the Anglican Church of Canada in the beautiful province of Alberta. And I am the priest responsible for the rector for Dayspring Ministries, which is a collaboration of three congregations of St. Mary's in Edgerton, St. Saviour's in Vermilion, and St. Thomas in Wainwright. Glad to have you with me today. As you know, some of you might know, I've been working through this book. I read it a while ago, but there's some great devotions, a month's worth of devotions in the back by Max Lucado, Safe in the Shepherd's Arms. I can see if you can see that. And I read this yesterday. It says, it's called Seeing the Glass Half Full. And he quotes Psalm 84, verse 11. The Lord God is like a sun and shield. The Lord gives us kindness and honor. And he says, rejections are like speed bumps on the road. They come with the journey. You can't keep people from rejecting you, but you can keep rejections from enraging you. How? By letting God's acceptance compensate for their rejection. When others reject you, let God accept you. He's not frowning. He's not mad. He sings over you. Take a long drink from his limitless love. And then he asked the question, does your self-esteem ever sag? When it does, remember what you are worth. Sometimes I need that. Sometimes I need that reminder. I really do. Whether it's, comments on the videos, and I open myself up. I understand that. People disagree with me. That's okay. I actually appreciate when people disagree with me because, as I've said before, when you disagree with me or someone presents me with a different perspective, maybe one that I had neglected or had never thought of before, it opens up my world, it opens up my mind to things I hadn't thought of, obviously, or things I hadn't considered in that way. And it broadens my life. It helps me think differently. It probably helps me to relate to other people differently as well. So I appreciate that. Sometimes though, when you put your heart into something, like you write a sermon or you do really well at your job, or you work really hard at your job, or you're trying to raise your kids or something, and someone comes back at you and rejects you. And now I got to say, sometimes it's easier to accept a rejection or when somebody criticizes you and they're harsh, when they're nasty, they're mean, they yell at you. Sometimes, it's as weird as it sounds, sometimes it's easier when someone comes at you, fangs barred, like they're ready to go at you. It's easier to handle that sometimes than it is to handle when someone rejects you gently or with those nice words, or when somebody you love or you care for. And rejection, it's hard. It's never easy. And I would suggest that we shouldn't simply reject rejection. Because there's something to be said in looking at that. Now, there have been times when I have been rejected or I've been criticized or someone has come at me like that, fangs barred fang. Well, I think I'm messing up that phrase, but anyway, you know what I mean. When someone's come at me that way and there really has been nothing in it but hatred. I mean, we've all come across that. You just meet somebody who's a really nasty person, and there are people like that out there, and they say things or they do things and they seem to just want to hurt. That there's no nugget of gold encrusted in that lump of coal. There's no diamond in that lump of coal. I am really messing up my metaphors today. Sorry about that. But the idea being that just sometimes there's nothing good to learn from people when they come at you that way. But in my experience, that has been like a minuscule amount of time. 99 times out of 100, or even maybe 999 times out of 1,000. If I humble myself to pay attention to what my critic is saying, or the person who has rejected me has said or done, I can look at that and find something worth taking away. I can find some glimpse of grace in there that, they rejected this and they say it's all these reasons. And I might argue with most of them, but that one reason, that's a good point. That's a really good point. I should take that under consideration. Or, I understand where they're coming from because, I did speak out of turn, or I did say something that was, maybe not the way it should have been. I shouldn't have said it that way. Or maybe I should have thought about it more before I said it in the first place. So there's often something we can take from criticism. But we need to recognize that it is not by criticism that we are best able to live. Yeah, it's part of life. We need it. But sometimes we need to reject the rejection. Sometimes we need to take a hard look and say, okay, was that rejection warranted? Did what I say or do, or not say or not do, was it wrong? And if it was, then own up to it, deal with it, fix it, learn from it. But sometimes there's nothing to learn from it. Sometimes a criticism is just a criticism, or a rejection is just a rejection. And the question then becomes, does that rejection actually reflect who I truly am? Does that person's opinion of me actually reflect the essence of who I am as a person, or as a priest, or a video person, or a writer, or a friend, or a wife, or a child, or a step-parent? All of the things that we do in our lives. Is their criticism, is their rejection actually reflective of a truth in my life that needs to be changed? I've been called a bleeding heart lots of times. Lots of people, you're too soft, you're too, you let people walk all over you. And when I try to explain to people that no, I don't let people walk all over me, I choose when I allow people to step in, and they may step on my toes, but they aren't treating me like a doormat. Even if the rest of the world looks at it that way, there's a purpose. There's a reason why I have allowed them to come into my sphere. There's a reason why I opened my door to them. We all have that peephole in the door of our lives. We can look through and say, am I going to let this person in? Am I going to open the door, like put the chain on the door and open it just enough so I can talk to them through the crack in the door? Am I going to open the door but keep my foot behind it so I can only open it so far? Or am I going to throw the door wide open and allow them to walk into my space and then interact with me as they will? Because the truth is, when we invite someone into our space, we cannot dictate to them how they will treat us. We can determine whether we'll let them stay in our space if they treat us poorly, but we can't dictate to them how they will treat us when we have invited them into our space. So if I invite someone into my headspace or my heart space, then I am aware that what they might have to say or do may not be completely wonderful. And then I have to be aware that it's my responsibility how I deal with that. I may indeed say, you know what, you're done. I'm evicting you from my headspace or my heart space. Or I may say to myself, they've got a point. I need to work on that. Or I may say to myself, I don't think you're right. I don't think this person is correct. But for whatever reason, they feel the need to say this. How might I make them feel comfortable enough and welcome enough that they can speak what they presume to be their truth, what they think is their truth, and allow them to say it so they get it off their chest, but then allow them to interact with me as they've shared it with me. Because the truth is that they've come into my home, and while I have the responsibility of determining how I interact with them and whether or not I let them stay in my space, because they have been welcomed into my space, they too have a responsibility about how they interact with me in my space. They can choose to be rude and hence realize that they're going to be evicted, or they can choose to have a dialogue with me in which we may or may not agree. But they don't have the right to make me feel less good about myself. That is completely up to me. My self-esteem is completely up to me. And that's a tough thing to acknowledge, because we seem to, in society, have given so much power to other people that it's hard to recognize that this is my own. We have to do the work of owning our own stuff, including having the courage to say to someone, I did indeed invite you into my space, and now I'm inviting you to leave. And if you don't accept the invitation to leave, I will have to evict you, and that won't be pretty. But we need to give people the opportunity to get up and leave. But we also need to give ourselves the opportunity to listen what others have to say. So the idea that we might be rejected. It's part of life. It happens to us all. But we can also reject the rejection. We can choose to honor ourselves and to recognize our worth even when another says we have none. We can invite them in to have a conversation about that and learn from each other what we have to share. But at the end of the day, our self-worth, our self-esteem, our sense of who we are cannot really be dictated by somebody else. We own it. The hard part is acknowledging that. And the hardest part, I think, is doing the work of accepting that. I'm 51, and I'm only a little way along the journey to recognizing that someone else's opinion of me matters only as much as I let it. Reject the rejection, but open the door for conversation. Knowing that at any point, if you're feeling like you're getting nowhere, you can say adios. You can say, get out of my room, get out of my space, get out of my house, get out of my heart, get out of my head. I'm going to own it for myself. As you go through your day, I encourage you to pay attention to the yay-sayers and the naysayers. Learn what it is you're called to learn from them, but also practice the discipline of acknowledging what you give yourself permission to do. Give yourself permission to let go of the rejection and to hold on to your self-worth. You are worth it. Reject the rejection. Own the self-worth. Have a great day. God bless. I'll see you tomorrow for Church at Home with Rachel.